Hello and welcome to another episode of Jules Investigates. I am the Squeegee of Justice. Thank you so much for joining us on Trial TV Live. We have got a great show for you guys tonight. Jules will be joining us and she has a special guest, Dr. Joe, who you may know from the Maya Kowalski trial. Dr. Joe testified on behalf of Maya and the Kowalskis. And tonight we're going to be talking with both of them about the appeal that JHACH had a couple weeks ago. I think about 12 days or a week or two ago. So Jules and I discussed it last week, but we are very thankful and grateful that Dr. Joe will be joining us to hear his perspective and his thoughts on how the appeal went. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what he has to say about that. So in the meantime, we are going to do a chat check-in. Let's see who is with us tonight. And Dr. Joe, 504, he was checking in. Hello, looking forward to joining you. I'm going to pull that up. So Dr. Joe checked in at 5 o'clock. I believe he will be joining us in a few minutes, but he's looking forward to joining us later this evening. Thank you, Dr. Joe. We're looking forward to talking with you as well. Curviel says, can't wait, Dr. Joe. Looking forward to that. Krista Limited Edition, thank you. She says, Dr. Joe, can I just say your passion, your testimony, and your grace throughout this trial are commendable. You, sir, are an incredible individual. Thank you, Jules, for always being awesome. Aw, thank you, Krista. You always say such nice, sweet things. Care Bears checking in. Hey, everyone, I made it. You will be lurking and listening. Cool. Julie, rock and roll. Thank you for joining us. Let's see, Lily Wayne. Oh, Kelly White. Kelly White is joining us as well. Thank you. Thank you. Lily Wayne. Hi, everybody. Looking forward to this. Very good. Krista Limited Edition. Saying hello. Therapist you know. Hey, hey. Excited about this. Julie, nice shirt. Thank you. Appreciate it. Corey. Yay, Corey. Wonderful. Good evening, everyone. Dr. Joe is a hero of mine. Awesome. Salty Girl. Hey, everyone. I wanted to say thank you for the gifted memberships that I got yesterday. Woohoo. Thank you. Nice. Nan D. Dr. Joe was such a great asset to Maya and her family. I agree. I agree. I'm really looking forward to hearing what he has to say about this, this JHACH appeal. Joe Shamrock saying hello. Susie, all right, here for it. Like number 21, awesome. Thank you for that. Ohio Palm Mom, haven't seen you in a bit. Glad to see you tonight. Thank you for joining us. All right, let us bring Jules on. Jules, are you you ready? Give me the high sign. All right, let's bring Jules out. Hey, Jules, how are you?
Tired. Can you hear
tired?
me?
I can. Yeah.
I'm good.
All right. Yeah. I guess the last time we spoke, well, we text each other all the time, but the last time we spoke was, well, actually, we did talk to you over the phone, but I think I checked out early. I think you and Aaron talked much longer than
hours. For like 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I think I checked out like 5 hours before that.
No, you checked out around 11.
11-ish, yeah. So, well, I guess the last time you and I spoke face to face was the appeal, was the JHACH appeal. So, I don't want to give too much away before Joe gets here. I guess he'll be here 5-10 minutes or so. But
yes, he had a business dinner that he had to attend to. However, he let everyone know that he had a prior commitment to this channel. So he let me know he was running late, and he said give him about 15 minutes. He already has everything set up. So as soon as he gets into the house, boom, he'll be on. And he's on his way to the house. So yeah.
Fantastic.
And he's looking forward to this. He is.
Great.
So
yeah, so he was at the hearing as well, or he was actually physically there as well? Okay.
Yes, he was sitting, we sat together.
Okay.
Yes, we sat together. And, you know, I'll give you a little bit of my perspective on Dr. Joe. Obviously, I met him during the trial. I did not know who he was until the very first time he testified, and I was like, "Ooh, okay." And it was during a break out in the hall. He actually came up to me and he goes, "Are you Jules?"
Mm.
And I was yes, I was very intimidated because of the fact that, I knew who he was, and he just got off the stand with a very impactful, testimony. So
Mhm.
I was like, yes. And he go,
Mhm.
and he said, so he told me that his wife was watching and listening. And so we did a little photo together. And um, from that point on, we became friends. I mean, we just became friends. So,
Mhm.
and he was very impactful.
Mhm.
Chris, you saw all of his testimony, right?
We did. We did. Truth be known, that's been a while. We haven't rewatched
Mhm.
it. So it's been what, 3 years now? Is
Yeah.
it 2 years?
Mm,
Now we're in 2025. So
yeah. So we're going on 3 years.
going on three
Um,
years, yeah.
yeah.
So
So, well, I haven't rewatched it either, but it's kind of embedded in my brain that I said
yeah.
it then, and then when I was on his channel, I said it as well.
Hmm.
Um, I think that his testimony, out of all of the plaintiff's witnesses, his his testimony was key
Hmm.
and impactful and brought to life things that the defense did not want us to know.
I
And
agree. Yeah.
I believe that the jury would not have found in the Kowalski family's favor had it not been for Dr. Joe.
Mm. Wow. So you think he was the swing witness, if you will?
I do. I have
Mhm.
not spoken to, any of the jurors, so I really don't know, uh, what was going on in their minds. And now I
Mhm.
have seen interviews with them. Kurt from Uncivil Law did one, and Dr. Joe did one. I don't remember
Mhm.
if Scott did or not, but
Mhm.
I, just from that one juror, he basically said yes, is where Dr. Joe was concerned, but he took everything as a whole, which I
Mhm.
liked hearing that
Mhm.
he was putting everything together in his own mind. But
Sure.
for me, the nail in the coffin was Dr. Joe.
Mhm.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. And I'm trying to remember back. We did watch it. Aaron and I watched it. We were not, streamers at that point, so we were just observing it. So we weren't like hanging on every word like we are now with trials. But I definitely remember he stood out. Dr. Joe, absolutely, that testimony stood out. I think Krista said it earlier, like his grace, his compassion, his syntax, the way he delivered, and I'm sure we'll see some of that tonight, was
Mhm.
just, he just made you feel comfortable. He made you want to believe him. And he won me over in the sense of, he's like, you this isn't what we did. This isn't what we do or did when he was running hospitals, right? He was like chief medical officer of several hospitals, I believe. So he was saying, this is the way things are done when I was in charge, or this is the way things should have been done, and I think that to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, because again, I'm remembering back 2.5 years, but that to me was like, oh, I kind of remember those moments. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. Why on earth would this be happening on this level and these people above don't know that that's happening on that level? And they're supposed to know everything, right?
Well, they are, but apparently they didn't, and things were kept um, buried, so to speak, I guess. And listen, we would have never have known about that IJ report if it wasn't for Dr. Joe. So, you know,
Yeah. So he shed light on things where we would not have known, like you just said. So I think you're right. I think I think his testimony was probably, if not the key moment, one of the key moments. I do remember, was it Shapiro that was cross-examining? Did Shapiro cross?
I'm trying to remember if it was, no, it was Hunter. It was Howard Hunter.
It was one of the two. So yeah, I had a 50-50 shot there. Yeah. And I remember the cross got a little spicy at times. I definitely remember that. And how long was he on the stand? Do you remember? I thought it was like 2 days. Was it more than 2 days or no?
Well, he testified on four different occasions. I don't remember. I think at one point there was like he may have been on there for 4 hours.
Okay.
You know, he was part of the direct testimony of the trial, and then he was brought back in for, you know, as a rebuttal witness.
Okay, so that's what I'm remembering then.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just remember. Yeah, I remember multiple outfits. Maybe, maybe that's what I'm remembering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, he took a lot of notes, like after he testified, because, you know, he was allowed to stay in the courtroom. I mean, there was points where he wasn't, you know, the defense was like, he shouldn't be in here, you know, and he had to go out in the hall or whatever. But when he was in the courtroom, if there was other testimony up and he would hear something, I could see him writing. And, you know, also, Dr. Richards was the same way. That was the psychologist or psychiatrist. I'm sorry, Dr. Richards is a psychiatrist, not a psychologist. So, yeah, he was very observant and very, you know, and one of the questions, you know, when he gets here, he should be here momentarily, is to ask him, because he didn't know the family. He didn't know Greg Anderson. He knew no one. And it's like he hears about this and he's like, whoa, wait a minute. This is not right. And, you know, then we'll have him tell his story on what really pushed him forward to say something. You know, it goes back to that, if you see something, say something.
Right. Yeah.
And he did, at great risk, I might add.
Right. That reminds me then of Karen Reed with Dr. Russell, right? She was in LA, Karen's in Boston, and she saw something and she called up, I guess, Alan Jackson or Yannetti, and she's like, I'm an expert in this field and I have something to say, right?
Well, actually, I had come to find out that that's not exactly how that happens.
Oh, really? Oops. Did I just say so? I don't know what I should say.
No. I can quote this. Okay. I got permission to do this. Okay. I know you guys did not cover the ASAP Rocky trial.
Correct.
I did. Okay. So I got it from Linda Kenny Bodden and JHACH Appeal as well, from both of them, that it was actually the prosecutor, John Lewin, the one who prosecuted ASAP Rocky, is the one who contacted Dr. Russell and said, hey, this case is going on and you really need to contact Mr. Jackson because you would be perfect for this.
Ah,
That's
okay.
that's how that. And yes, I was allowed to say that. Yes.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's actually how it came about, you know.
Okay. I wonder if that will be allowed in, or if that will be presented in the trial, in the second trial, if they'll say, you in fact didn't just find this randomly reading a New York Times article or whatever it was. I
It
think
was
this, you
Boston
said
Globe.
Boston
Boston
Globe. Yeah.
Globe. Yeah. Boston Globe.
Yeah. I think
No,
she's
I think after Lewin told her, she started reading the paper and was like,
right.
that's where I come from. That's
Right.
where I worked and I was educated there and maybe I should. So,
Right. Right. It's almost like you have an obligation, like this burning desire when you see something that's going on and you're like, there's absolutely no way that that makes sense on any level. And then if you have the expertise, then you can call these people, meaning the defendants or the prosecutors, and say, I want to offer my 2 cents, if you will. So
do you think that because we're not lawyers, obviously, Chris. So this is just, you know, personal, my personal opinion. And, I don't, do you think it's harmful or helpful when someone does that?
I think it's helpful to the side it's that's presenting it, but I think that the other side considers it harmful. So it depends on which side you're talking to. From a watcher, I if they are voir dired and they're okay being a witness, and both sides say, okay, I'm okay with you being an expert, then I think it's helpful. I don't think, again, from a trial watcher standpoint, I don't think it's a bad thing when experts see something, and like you said, see something, say something, and they step in and they say, wait a minute, this is just wrong, or I don't agree with what is being presented. Please, let me be heard. As long as both sides, go through the voir dire, and they are able to um, put them in as an expert, then why not? Look at Maya. I think that helped. Obviously, we were just talking about that. That helped tremendously.
I agree with you. Yeah, I do.
So you think it's helpful or harmful or both or neither?
I think it's like maybe it's the type of case. I don't know. In Maya's case, I thought it was incredibly helpful. Um,
Sure. Well, because
and
you were on the side of Maya, but if you're on the side of
but I
JHACH,
but I
right?
didn't start out that way, Chris.
Oh, were you
Yeah.
neutral or were you on the side of JHACH?
I went in leaning more towards the defense
Okay.
because I had no previous knowledge of this. And I just found that the accusations were like mind boggling. Like, no, nobody's going to do this at a children's hospital. This is like impossible. The
Right. Right.
first, the first week and a half, or say 10 days of trial, I was actually sitting on the defense side of the courtroom.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
then as things started to develop, and I started hearing testimony, and then, I was like, I'm sitting in the wrong place here.
Yeah.
And I moved over because I didn't want to be affiliated with doctors and nurses that could behave so horribly to children.
Yeah.
And that's really how that happened.
Yeah. I did not watch that the Netflix documentary. I believe Erin did. So that's why she's like, "Oh my God, we have to watch this." So I went into it. I think, if I remember correctly, I went into it with a fairly open mind, or what I went into it, Erin had told me. She's like, what they did to this child and this family, but I didn't know the true levels of and depths that
Yeah.
JHATCH went to. and still continues to go to. So I went into it relatively open-minded, but I was, I think, leaning initially towards Maya, and the
Yeah.
Kowalskis.
No, I didn't start out that way. But
Yeah.
Greg Anderson and company certainly won me over.
Mhm.
But I will say, after the first full week of trial,
Mhm.
um, on that weekend, I did watch the
Mhm.
documentary, and I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was hard to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember when Erin watched it, she's like, "Oh, it's going to be really tearful and depressing because it's about a child." But then, obviously, as you go through and watch it, yes, it is about the child, Maya, but ultimately, it's Beata that really gets you. You know.
And what bothers me to this day is that people don't understand the act of self deleting.
Hmm.
Um, pe- Different people do it or attempt to do it for different reasons.
Hmm.
Um, Having someone, I'm just going to say it, my father self deleted. So, I was young, and his reasons were different from Beata's, but I do believe that Beata felt during the last week of that 97-day period that Maya was in the hospital, that the only way to get Maya out was to self delete. That if she was out of the picture permanently, that the hospital would let Maya go home. And lo and
Hmm.
behold, less than 48 hours after the hospital found out,
Hmm.
Maya was home. That's
Yeah.
pretty messed up.
It is pretty messed up. Yeah.
Yet people criticize her.
Hmm.
Why?
Hmm.
Why?
Yeah. Yeah. You weren't in her head. You weren't in her shoes. You weren't in her heart. You have no idea what was going on with her. So, but
No.
that's what people do. Everybody's got an opinion, and they're more than happy to throw it around.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I suppose so. Let me
especially
check.
on the
Go ahead.
especially
Go
on
ahead.
the internet. Oh, Kathy Smith says she's so sorry.
Oh, thank you. It was decades and decades ago. So
I know.
I'm,
I think.
I mean, I'm not dismissing it by any means at all, but I have come to terms with it. So
Yeah. Yeah. Caprila's giving you some hugs and therapist,
listen, now that we have brought this particular subject up, and we're by no means staying on it, but if anybody ever has any dark thoughts, please talk to somebody, reach out to somebody, and you could even dial 688 on your cell phone, and you'll be
Mhm.
directed to someone that can help you and talk to you. Do not suffer in silence. Just don't. It's not good
Mhm.
for you or your family.
Yeah. Isn't 211, isn't that a helpline as well? It's 211.
I don't know that. I don't know,
Uh,
but I know for self-deleting, 688
mhm.
is
Gotcha.
yeah.
Gotcha. Hi, B.O. Blazy, my experience receiving ket infusions for pain myself in hospital locally. So you, B.O. Blazy, you are receiving the same treatments that Maya had, if I'm interpreting that correctly.
Okay, Dr. Joe said he'll be in a few minutes.
Okay, fantastic. We're holding him a chair, a seat, and all that good stuff. Ohio Palm Mom also says Jules hugs to you.
Oh, thank you.
Ohio Palm Mom 211 is information and referral. 211 is
Uh,
if you're in Florida. Yeah, I have somebody who is connected with that. That's why it jumped into my head.
I wish I could read the
Do you want me
chat.
to read? Let's see.
Trial,
Oh,
yes, I can't see what it says.
okay. Objection, Trial Junkies United. Objection. Jules, you are so right. I'm sorry for the experience of your father's passing. I think Maya's mom probably thought she might be the problem, and if she moved herself, her daughter would be okay.
I do believe that. And Dr. Richards actually testified, if you remember, Dr. Scott Richards, the psychiatrist, testified to that when someone is being affected the way she was, even though she was not his patient, he didn't, he was not treating Beata. And also, let's not forget that Beata was never diagnosed as what's the new term for Munchausen now? I don't even know, but I know that there's a new term for it.
Oh, is there?
Yeah, there's. I'm sure therapists in the chat will probably know, or if Dr. Rachel is here, there is a new term for it. They don't use Munchausen by proxy anymore, but I just don't recall what it is. But she was never diagnosed. It was just no. Least of all, doctors and nurses from a children's hospital, yet they kept throwing that around constantly.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Debbie Blair says hello. Hello to you, Debbie Blair. Let me just pull this up. Therapist, correct. Fictitious disorder by proxy.
Thank you. I knew one of our girls. I knew either therapist or Dr. Rachel would know. So
factitious disorder by proxy.
Yeah.
So you're basically making it up, right? It's fictitious. So you're making up this disorder, and then if it's by proxy, it's somebody else's making.
So you're giving it to someone else.
Yeah. It's almost like gaslighting. I mean, you could almost kind of say it's gaslighting.
I guess, yeah. That would be a medical term for gaslighting. Yeah.
Right.
I guess so.
Yeah. Oh no, Jules. You're not feeling well today. You shouldn't do this today, or you should. Yeah. Factitious disorder imposed on another. Yeah, Capri Law got it too. Fictitious. Yeah, and Debbie Blair, she wasn't even her patient.
No.
Right.
No.
And yet here they are diagnosing her, whatever. Yeah.
Right. And even during the at the appeals hearing, and when Dr. Joe gets here, he'll talk about it as well. The attorney for JHACH brought that up, several times in his argument about Beata, and well, yes, Judge Smith did ask a question in regards to that, but kudos to Judge Smith, because she took it a step further and really delved into the factitious disorder by proxy, although she referred to it as Munchausen. Right. But she and one of the other justices, said, well, isn't it true, though, that you can drive someone to self-delete? And that attorney, it just kind of went over his head. He was missing the point. I remember during trial, and if I remember it incorrectly, I'm sure Dr. Joe will correct it, but I remember that there was some sort of testimony where there was text messages produced by either the doctors or the nurses or both, but text exchanges where one of them said, oh, she's probably gonna herself. And how could I'm still to this day bothered by that.
Yeah, Erin says she remembers that. That strikes a chord as well. I kind of remember that as well.
So, how does one get? I mean, look, they were exchanging text messages referring to Maya as the ketamine girl. I mean, yes, thank you,
Yeah. Ohio
Chris.
Palm Mom and Krista. Yeah.
Yeah.
They both
So,
said it.
so I think the questions by Judge Smith was reasonable, and which tells me that if not all three, but definitely Judge Smith researched, or maybe Maya's legal team included those texts in the briefs, because I did not read the briefs. That was just way too much for me, and I did stay away from that. But for her to really do a deep dive into that particular part intrigued me.
Yeah. So that's I'm looking at her name. Says Andrea Smith, Judge Smith. That's who you're referring to. There were three of them.
Yes.
Judge Black, Judge LaRose, and Judge Smith.
Yes. Judge Black had several questions of the JHACH people. The other judge only had, I think, one question, but Judge Smith was like all over him.
Yeah.
She was all over it.
She was, yep. Is that Dr. Joe?
He's in the studio.
Oh, do not see him. Oh, there he is. There you are.
Yay!
There you are. Hello, hello. Welcome.
Mea culpa, mea culpa. I am so sorry.
You're fine.
So far behind. I apologize. Great to see you guys.
Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time.
You bet. Us. Well, doctors notoriously run late, so I'm just staying true to form, I guess. Right.
There you go. How's your signature and your handwriting? Does that?
Oh, it is. I sneeze and sign, right? Isn't that the way it usually works? No, actually,
I've seen his handwriting. He writes like a doctor.
No, actually, you know what? That's not true. After 12 years of Catholic education and all the scars that I have from the rulers, it's actually not that terrible. So, it's better than my kids.
Sitting next to me, Joe, writing notes. I was like, you sent me a note, and I looked. I was like.
Well, so I actually have I have said notes. I'll submit it. I'll submit it for a signature analysis. But
there you go.
Well,
that'll be our next stream. We'll have a handwriting
there you go.
expert on to go over it. Go ahead.
Well, I'll tell you, I remember writing that note to Jules and trying to not lose focus with what was going on, because I heard your discussion about Judge Andrea Smith and the quality of her questions, the depth and sophistication of her questions, both from a legal and from a humane standpoint, was really extraordinary and showed a tremendous amount of commitment to learning about the case, doing her homework before she got there, But Jules, I know that I chicken scratched you with the question because there was so much flying off of the dais, so guilty as charged in that one isolated incident.
Dr. Joe, before we really delve into the hearing, if you might give us a little bit of insight, a condensed version, however, could you please inform our audience how you got involved and what tripped your trigger in order to come forward and help the family?
Yeah, happy to. And listen, I just want to say thanks for having me on.
No, thank you.
This community has been remarkably welcoming to me since I got involved with the Kowalski family. So it was kind of innocent and out of left field, Jules and Chris. I was having dinner with a longtime friend. I've known Steve for, 35, 40 years. And his wife and my wife are friends. Steve and I are longtime friends. We go out probably every month, every other month. And over dinner, he was telling me about this case that that one of his attorneys was managing. And Steve was the owner of Chris Craft Boats. He and his partner bought it out of bankruptcy around 2000, and that's why he had two of the best nicknames associated with the trial. The Yacht Father.
Nice.
The Yacht Father was my favorite.
That's
right?
a good one.
But,
yeah.
So anyway, Steve mentioned it. Steve used Greg Anderson and the Anderson Glenn law firm for outside litigation for Chris Craft. And so he was talking about, hey, I was just talking with my attorney. He's representing this family, blah, blah, blah. And at that dinner, candidly, it was just something to talk about. And then I asked him to send me some info about it. And he sent me two articles, one from The Cut, which is the New York Times Magazine, online magazine. And then the other was, I think, from USA Today. And I read through these articles and I was just so shocked by what I read that I sent Steve a very simple message. I said, tell me how I can help this family. And he introduced me to Greg and Nick Whitney. And, at the beginning, all I was doing was trying to help them reframe their focus, because a perfect example, they were really focusing on trying to get to understanding the risk management committee, because that's doctors and nurses and administrators and board members, right? So that's where the decisions had to have been made. Well, you would think that, but the way that hospitals work, Maya's decision making that impacted her care was being made at the frontline level by the risk managers themselves, not the risk management committee, which was really more of a review board. And as it turns out, the committee wasn't really finding out about what the risk managers were doing, which just kind of amplified the problem, right?
Right.
So anyway, so I started out just as kind of advising them and helping them to understand how hospitals operate. And then a month or two into it, I think it was in the month of May, I actually drove up to Jacksonville and attended the depositions of Dr. Perno, who was the hospital's VP of Medical Affairs, and Dr. Napolitano, who I worked with at my hospital here in suburban Tampa when we were setting up the pediatric hospital within the hospital. But Tony Napolitano is one of the most influential clinicians, because he was the chair of pediatric medicine. And there were anywhere, depending on the time frame, between 9 and 15 different divisions and departments reported up to Tony. And when both of them said, I'd never heard of this case until I was notified that I was being deposed and the lawyers asked me to review records.
Wow.
A case as extraordinary as Maya's, where she was in their hospital, she was meeting with an attorney. That doesn't set off a red flag, right?
Right.
This is a case where you've separated the mom from the baby for 3 months. That didn't set off an alarm. Yeah. Right. There was so much that was unusual about it. And for these two most influential physician leaders in the administrative and medical staff to not even hear about the case, that really kind of, that set off a lot of alarms for me. Yeah. And then about a month later, Jules, they asked me to provide an expert witness affidavit. And that really pulled me in. It was kind of like Michael Corleone in Godfather 2. I try to get out, but they keep pulling me in.
Right. Unbelievable. That's flabbergasted. I'm flabbergasted that the people at that level didn't know what was going on. And that came before you came on, Dr. Joe. Jules and I were talking about that, as your testimony was so impactful. And that was one of the moments that I remember that you got across by saying these higher ups should have known what was going on. and they didn't, so we were talking about that potentially influenced the jury and had
And
an impact on me.
and Dr. Joe stood up in the witness box several times. But listen, I have said it to Dr. Joe as well, but this man is so humble. He just really does not understand when I say, and everyone feels, he put the nail in JHACH's coffin, and he got this win for the family. But the man is too humble to accept.
I will tell you, Jules, I appreciate what you're saying. And there were a lot of others who provided very strong testimony. And I think candidly that JHACH and Hill Ward Henderson put the nail in the coffin. I may have swung a hammer, but I quite candidly, and I think that you saw it at the appeal, there really wasn't much for Mr. Steichelever to work with. And I think that's because of a questionable approach taken by the defense attorneys, and by an extraordinary approach taken by Judge Carroll to appeal-proof this verdict. But it was, and I just don't. One of the things that you and I have talked about, Jules, just privately, is that the characterization that Mr. Steichelever attributed to Sally Smith, she's rude, she's abrasive, she has this raspy cigarette voice. I mean,
that didn't go over well at all.
But what was brilliant about Mr. Tanner's response to that was he said, keep in mind, judges, we only showed a videotape for 30 minutes and Sally Smith was deposed for, probably 10 hours. They picked out 30 minutes and showed a kind of a highlight film of her various depositions. It was Hill Ward Henderson's decision to bring her into the courtroom. And Jules, you were there. I was there. If you'll remember, they had her rehabilitated. Her hair was different. Her makeup was different. Her posture, she had been heavily coached on how to be likable. And it didn't last.
No. And also I think the turnoff was, for me, was when she came walking in with those 7 or 8 huge binders. And I thought, okay, what is she gonna do with this? Does her carrying binders make her more believable? What did you think about that, Dr. Joe?
Well, you remember what happened when I walked in with a binder, right?
Yeah, they
I got it taken away.
They wouldn't let you have it.
Can you tell us about that? Like, can you tell us what happened with that?
Yeah, Chris. So, I felt that I was given grief about not having, for the deposition, I didn't have anything prepared. I didn't have documents laid out in front of me, right? So I thought, okay, well, it's trial testimony. I'll make sure that if I say something that they want to argue with, I can turn to, and and I had a 3 or 4 inch binder with a lot of the depositions, and they were highlighted, and I had them tagged, right? So if we're going to talk about text messages, that's here. If we're going to talk about, Sally Smith, that's here, right? And so, you are not allowed to, and I learned this in real time, you're not allowed to read from a deposition, but you are allowed to use documents to refresh your memory. Right. But everything should be spontaneous. So I got asked a question and I said, I know where that is. And I went to the page and Mr. Hunter immediately objected. I want to see what's in the book. And I never got the book back. I do have it today. But but I thought that would be a plus, not a minus. It apparently was a very big minus. So I didn't make that mistake a second time.
Was that your first trial then, testifying?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
I have, as an obstetrician,
came across. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, as an obstetrician practicing in the state of Florida, one of the most litigious states in the union. I do everything I can to avoid lawyers in courtrooms. And this was purely again, it was such a casual way that I got involved initially. But then if you even think you have a heart, how do you not feel for the Kowalski family, right? And these people needed somebody to fight for them, and I wanted to do that.
Well, before you came on, we said that you appeared on the stand with such grace and compassion. You were obviously well-spoken, and you laid out your story very clear and concisely that we could all follow it. And that's why I asked if that was your first time, because it seemed like you were very comfortable on the stand. And I think any one of us in the chat, myself included, Jules, I don't know how you would feel. I would be just a ball huddling in the corner. I don't think I could come across as calm and cool and collected as you did.
Oh, thanks. So, but I appreciate that compliment. But I'm sure you're mindful of the analogy of the duck swimming calmly across the lake and paddling like crazy under the water.
Right. Well, we didn't see going under the water. Yeah.
Well,
there's the waves.
When you get nervous, you get a dry throat and a dry mouth, right? And you notice the size of the Stanley Cup that my wife loaded up for me. As a matter of fact, our friend Megan Fox gave me a huge rash of grief and called me a soccer mom for showing up with it. But, hey, guilty. You know what? It was a necessary evil.
The only downside of that is that you have to use the restroom more often then, right? If you're drinking from this huge cup, you got Judge Carroll. I need a comfort break.
Well, fortunately, I wasn't the only one over 50 in the room. So
this is true. This is very true.
Although I will tell you, Jules, you'll remember this. It was never terribly comfortable. The restrooms were at the end of a hallway, like down the hall and around the corner and the end of that hall. And, listen, you're using the same restrooms as, Howard Hunter and Ethan Shapiro and everybody else. It was like, there's kind of a rule in men's room. You don't talk to the guy next to you anyway. That was a very easy rule to keep in mind when you're standing next to those guys, right?
Right. Well, just keep focused.
Yeah.
Look forward. Eyes forward, Chris.
Whatever you do, don't look down. Don't look over.
But you're so right about that, because on several occasions being in the ladies' room, Ms. Crowles.
Yeah.
I always mispronounce. Yeah, I always mispronounce her name. We were always in there together. Now, that being said, she was always very kind, but the conversations that took place was, it was so cold in the courtroom, or, what the weather was like out. There was, nothing about the trial. It was, she was in the ladies' room. She was very pleasant. And also in the ladies' room, that's how I met Maya.
Oh, wow. That's funny.
That is how I met Maya. I was in the stall coming out, and I wanted to try to, rush out, wash my hands and get out of there. And when I opened up the door, I went, boom. And, I didn't know it was Maya. And I went and grabbed by the shoulders, and I was like, I am so sorry, because I practically knocked her over. And she turned around and she goes, with her soft-spoken voice, that's okay. And I was like, seriously, I was like, Maya, it's you. I'm so sorry. And from that point on, here we are. You're right about restrooms.
But you know what, Jules, and we talked about this during the testimony. There were I think multiple occasions. I know it was at least once, and I'm pretty confident it was multiple occasions. I pointed out that there are good people working at All Children's Hospital. And there were good people in the courtroom that day, but they were on the other side, right? And we saw it because I met up with you in the waiting area outside of the appellate courtroom, right? And who was there but Mr. Shapiro? And, you and I went over and said hello, and we had a very pleasant 4 or 5 minute conversation. And it wasn't I mean, it was like talking to somebody that you work with or somebody that went to school with, right? It was
Absolutely.
very easy conversation that, so I mean, these are generally good people who were just, in the heat of battle and on opposite sides of an issue, right?
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. If you had, well, no, I don't want to ask that question.
Okay.
Let me ask you this question.
Strike that.
Yeah, strike that. Do you have any regrets? Because you know the backlash that we all were given after the trial was over. So do you have any regrets?
No, I don't have regrets. Do I wish it were different? Absolutely. Right. I wish that, listen, I don't regret because this family needed somebody to help articulate how wrong the care was for this 10-year-old girl who celebrated her 11th birthday alone in a hospital room, surrounded by people that she didn't trust and didn't know. Okay. Yeah. Somebody needed to help articulate that. And I felt that I was in a position to be able to help. Okay. So I have zero regrets. Now, has there been retaliation? Has there been retribution? Much like we testified was the culture of the day at All Children's back then. Yeah, I have paid a far steeper price for something that I did pro bono to cost me out of pocket as much as it has, in terms of retaliation. Yeah, it's been painful. So I don't have regrets about what I did, but I absolutely wish that it didn't have to be like that.
Yeah, I don't have any regrets either. The only, but I would do things differently. I probably wouldn't have been so vocal about reporting on the trial. I think I probably should have stayed more on, still kept my reporting and doing all of that, but stayed more neutral than I was.
And are you, so you would have expressed fewer opinions in your reporting?
Yes.
Okay.
Because
that's
people,
fair.
and the only reason why I say that is that people, even till this day, are under the false impression that I knew who one or more of the jurors, which was a lie. That I knew, juror. Well, it was juror number one on the entire trial. I thought he was juror number 7. So I mean, if somebody is in the know, like they claim that I was in the know, I think I would have known that he was actually juror number 1 and not number 7. So, but to this day, people are like, I have never met either one of them. I mean, it's just crazy. So for that reason alone, because people really get vicious and out of hand. But why don't we pivot to the appeal?
Sure.
Okay.
And
do you want me to play any of it, or what do you guys want to do?
It's your call.
Do you want to just talk about it? Do you want me to play any parts of it? I have it queued up. Dr. Joe, just so you know, Jules and I watched it in its entirety, I think last week.
Okay.
I took notes, but whatever you want to do. Do you want to pull up anything in particular, or you want to just talk about it from an overall standpoint? What were your impressions?
I'm here as your guest. I'm here to do whatever you would like me to address. But I will tell you, keep in mind, so the one thing that so Rob from Law and Lumber did a great job with Peter, the lawyer, in breaking down the film. And if anybody wants to get caught up on it from a legal analytical perspective, I would recommend that you take a look on YouTube. I think it's on Peter's Lawyer channel with Rob, and I want to say it was Thursday or Friday.
No, you're
But-
thinking. Yes, they did do one, but Rob also did one
Rob
with
did one with Ian.
Yeah, I saw
Yeah.
the one with Ian. Yeah, that's the one we saw.
Yeah. I don't stay up that late. I can't. But I did watch part of the replay of Rob and Ian, but I watched all of Rob and Peter. And I thought, you had the two lawyers together, really doing a great job of breaking it down from a legal perspective. And one of the things that they didn't really drive home the point, but they made me think about, keep in mind that the appellate hearing itself was 30 minutes aside. So 1 hour, start to finish.
Right.
And, but as you were saying about Judge Smith before I came on, Jules, there were thousands and thousands and thousands of pages submitted for the judges to review before it got to the hearing. So in a sense, the hearing was a snapshot of a very long and detailed movie. I think overall impression, I think that the hearing overwhelmingly was not a good day for JHACH.
I didn't think so either.
I just don't think that Judge Carroll or Hill Ward Henderson left them much to work with. But I, like you, Jules, I can't read 10,000 pages of fine print, right?
Yeah.
So I did not read all of the motions and all of the supporting documentation. So I don't, listen, there's whole parts of the decision that will come out of the briefs, not the arguments. So, we may be surprised, but, I think that, again, I have huge praise for Judge Carroll. I think that he did a masterful job trying to appeal proof the verdict as much as he possibly could.
Yeah.
It was interesting because part of Hill Ward Henderson's team was Chris Altenburn, who until just a couple of years ago was one of the judges sitting up on the appellate panel, right?
Yeah.
He was one of them. And so as he would raise issues with an argument or evidence or whatever, it would almost force Judge Carroll to deal with it in the moment and eliminate it as a point for appeal later on, right? So
and he did a great job of it.
Well, he's a very experienced and very smart attorney and former judge, right? He did his job well, but did he make it harder to appeal the case? Maybe. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know.
I'm not a lawyer either, as everyone knows, but I think he may have made it harder without realizing he was making it harder. But the points that JHACH's appellate attorney, I can't remember.
Derek Steicheleather, yeah.
Steicheleather.
Who also is an incredible attorney, very bright, very well trained, and very accomplished.
But
again,
did you think his choices? But did you think his choices of what he decided to argue in that brief were the right path to go down?
Well, again, relying on Peter and Rob as licensed and practicing attorneys, I know that their opinion was that some of the arguments were weak, but again, what did he have to work with? What did he pick the best of a bad bunch? I don't know. I don't know. I just think that Judge Carroll did such a terrific job of appeal proofing the verdict, appeal proofing the jury's findings. And, at the end of the day, some of JHACH's arguments articulated by Mr. Steicheleather really seem to be trying to relitigate decisions that the jury had already made. And that's not how appeals work. Appeals have to be, hey, the jury made this decision, but they were relying on this law and they got the law wrong,
Hmm.
right? And I didn't hear that. Now, maybe it's in the briefs, but I didn't hear a lot of that.
No.
Well, straight out of the gates, I'm just looking at my notes real quick here. Straight out of the gates, it's Stikelether. I just want to make sure I'm pronouncing.
I believe it is Stike leather. Stike leather.
Okay,
Yes.
leather. Okay,
Yeah.
Stikelether. Okay, let me just
Yeah.
make a quick note of that. So straight out of the gates, he says there's 3 clear legal errors. They were allowed to claim self-deletion. They were allowed to accuse the hospital in fraud. And then this is the one that stuck in for me. The trial court, Judge Carroll, misconstrued Chapter 39 immunity. So he was throwing Judge Carroll under the bus like straight away.
100%.
Yeah. So you guys agree with that?
I agree with him. I agree with your assessment that he was throwing Judge Carroll under the bus. But, again, you look at Mike Tanner, and his counter argument was, hey, wait. And there was nothing. There were really 2 topics that were argued pre-trial way up here, and everything else is down here. The 2 things were Chapter 39 immunity and access to the text messages, which were so damaging. I knew this was going to happen. Poor ketamine girl's mom offed herself. Those text messages were horrible, and it took 15 hearings to get the limited number of text messages they were able to get. There were a similar and actually higher number of hearings focused on Chapter 39 immunity. And as Mr. Tanner pointed out, Chris, a lot of the arguments that Anderson Glenn initially brought to the bear got kicked out pre-trial, right? So there was a lot of argument that was eliminated by applying Chapter 39. So, to say that he got it wrong, well, does that apply to the decisions that went in your favor or just the ones that went against your favor, right?
Yeah. There were 51 summary judgments before it even got to trial. 51.
Yeah. And don't forget, this was the second time that the Second District Court of Appeals has heard the Kowalski case. They heard it prior to trial, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is not an under-litigated case. So, again, most cases in the state of Florida that go to appeal are upheld. They are affirmed, not overturned. And I'm hoping that this one falls into the majority.
I think it will, only because, from all the research that I have done, appeals court, especially when they don't like to overturn judges, but what they don't like more than that is to overturn a jury's verdict. They really don't. And so I think this is a tough one for JHACH to win.
Yeah. What is the appeal win rate? Is it like 2% or something?
It's less than 5% of
Really
cases
low.
get overturned.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was that low, but
Now,
wow.
is that criminal, Jules? Is that criminal, civil, or just in general? Because I'm
Across
only
the board,
across the board,
in general, less than 5% of cases are overturned on appeal.
Yeah, which makes sense, because think about it. If you go to trial, you spend all this time and money at trial, and then it goes to the appellates, and then they overturn it. What's the point of having the trial in the first place? If it's a higher number, if it's like 90% of the time, it's overturned.
So what does that tell you, Chris? Most of the time, the people from the bus stop get it right.
Thank God.
That was probably a comment that the Hill Ward team would like to take back, right?
Yeah.
I would think so.
That comes back to bite them many, many times.
Whew.
So I've highlighted another moment in the appeal. So I guess we'll just kind of go through notes. I think that's fine.
Sure.
So Judge LaRose or LaRose?
LaRose, right.
LaRose. Okay, Judge LaRose. He asked, if a hospital is operating under the umbrella of protection, what is the duty? And the answer was, the duty is to the child and not the parent, because the parent is always outraged and will sue. All right. And I can kind of understand that because they want to keep, the lawsuits at a minimum. I get that. But then Judge Smith asked, don't you have to balance that with the parents' rights? And
Right.
then the answer came back, they can coexist, but legislation has made a clear choice. What if I'm wrong and there could be blowback?
Yeah.
So what do you make of that? That obviously Stikelether didn't want to open the door for litigation, and I scraped my nail, I'm going to go sue this hospital for $10 million or whatever.
Yeah.
Did you agree with that, his answer, or where do you stand with that?
I think it was best answer he could offer.
Mhm.
But, again, it's so full disclosure, Chris, as an OBGYN, when I was in practice, I was a mandatory reporter. And if I never hesitated to intervene in a case where there was suspected domestic violence, for instance, or sexual abuse, right?
Mhm.
I never hesitated to get involved because I knew that I had immunity as a mandatory reporter.
Mhm.
And the mandatory reporting was life-saving for some patients, right? So,
Sure. Yeah.
but where I'm really, really confused, and even after hearing the arguments in the appeals hearing, Dr. Perno, the VP of Medical Affairs, made a statement in his deposition, and it was played at trial, where he said, once you sign the consent to treat, I can do anything I feel is medically justified.
Wow. Yeah.
My jaw.
And let me ask you, yeah, is
table.
that true? Is that true? Was that a true statement?
Read the consent to treat. It's literally like it's a third of a page on a 4-page document. Most of the consent to treat at JHACH in use at that time that the Kowalski family signed on behalf of Maya was 4 pages long. Most of it dealt with HIV, with photography, with all these other issues, right? The consent to treat was really the actual language around consent to treat was very, very limited. And no, it's not. You are never able to inflict your will upon a patient simply because they signed a consent.
Carte blanche.
Right?
Yeah, carte blanche. You could just do whatever you want to. I mean, that opens the door to anything and everything. That's like one of my worst nightmares is
right.
being on a table, unable to move, and people are just doing whatever they want to. I mean, that's
Chris, so my children are both college age now, right? Yeah. And at the time when they were born, the whole idea of an elective C-section was very, very popular, right? I don't want to go through labor. I don't want the stretch marks. I don't whatever, right?
Right.
And so, I mean, the pee on the pregnancy test was barely even dry before my beloved wife was saying, I'd like to have an elective C-section. And Chris, I said to her, would you let me take out your appendix if you didn't need it taken out? Would you let me take out your gallbladder? Would you let me perform any kind of a surgery on you that you don't need? Mm-hmm. So if I truly believed that a signed paragraph consent to treat gave me the right to do all of those surgeries despite an argument from the patient, I mean, it's just illogical. Yeah. But he said that with such conviction and such authority and refused to back down from it, right? Yeah. And that was, I remember legibly writing a note to Mr. Anderson saying, oh my goodness, right? We gotta dive deeper here, right? And it was such an aha moment. But so I don't object at all to them following their duty as a mandatory reporter. Mm-hmm. They raised the issue. It was denied. There was nothing found, right? Then they consulted the expert, Sally Smith, and she said, well, use this language. And lo and behold, second time around, they got an investigation started. But should that investigation have required a 100-day hospital stay and everything in between? Or was that really something that could have been wrapped up in a matter of days or weeks or even months, right? So I wonder where the tail starts to run out on what's covered from an immunity standpoint. And one thing that the lawyers did do pretty well was they presented their different views of what that standard is, and I think Mr. Tanner talked about there have to be 3 elements. It has to be blah, 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 right? And so, I think that Mr. Steicheleather offered the best argument he could in representing, being a zealous advocate for his client, right? Mm-hmm. That's the legal standard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Jules, you want to? I have a few more things we can go through in the notes if you want to
go ahead. I just want to bring up though about Judge Smith because I was like really impressed by her.
I thought all 3 judges were very, very, very dialed in. But what I loved about Judge Smith's questions, and she clearly had offered the most questions.
Yes.
But she really brought a humane side to it. She sounded like every parent that in the audience,
Agreed.
And yes, this is what the law says, but what about the implications, right? She was looking at the ripple effect, the unintended consequences. I don't think that anybody at JHACH, even Sally Smith and Kathy Beatty, I don't think even they would have imagined where this case ended up 100 days later. And they sure as shooting didn't start their involvement with that as the desired outcome.
Yeah, no way.
But I do think, my opinion, having looked at a lot of what was in the trial and a lot of what wasn't allowed into the trial, my opinion is that they got into a situation where it was an echo chamber, and they were not getting outside input from Jackie Crane, who was, as the chief legal officer, responsible for the risk management department. They weren't getting input from the CEO. They weren't getting input from the board. And all of these people had accountability and responsibility. And somebody somewhere should have, arguably maybe did say, stop, let's pull up for a second. Are we doing the right thing here? Right? Have we lost the forest for the trees?
Yeah.
And everything points to this kind of echo chamber where they were all reinforcing each other's views. And it was all about the teams. And, if you are relying on teams to make decisions, then who's responsible? It's always this, right? And there wasn't anybody. And again, Chris, here's the point that I tried to bring up in the trial testimony. There may have, and I find it hard to imagine that there wasn't somebody who said, "Wait a minute, let's talk about this." Yeah. But that's where the testimony on the last day was so important, was that they had this culture of retaliation and retribution. That was the way that the new leader who came in from Baltimore, who was been in Hopkins for a decade or more at that point, he was the one who said, there has been a culture of retaliation and retribution. And you know what? In that situation, if you're a frontline worker, it's hard to speak up. And it sure as heck is hard to stand up against someone who is higher up than you.
Yeah.
So I would bet, I would be shocked if there wasn't from time to time somebody or some people who wanted to point out that we may not be doing the right thing, but just couldn't get an audience or in fact got shut down.
Sure.
Again, people who go into healthcare overwhelmingly are good people. Yeah, you always have some bad apples, but overwhelmingly they're good people who want to help other people in very stressful times.
Yeah.
And I just think that they started listening to their own stuff, and it became more about proving themselves right rather than helping this 10-year-old girl.
Yeah. Great points. Yeah, I don't think anybody at JHACH woke up in the morning and said, "Oh, we're going to get the Kowalskis, we're going to make their lives living hell." And I agree with you. I think 99.9% of people that go into healthcare have that genuine desire to help others, And I'm sure there still are many people that work at JHACH that still have that attitude. What we saw was, like you said, that dark side, the bad apples, if you will. And then it makes us want to vilify the entire organization, where that's probably wrong on our part, my part. I'll take responsibility for that, because we are just seeing that dark side,
And Chris, I agree with you, and I can't remember who it was that made the argument. I was in an audience and I heard somebody talking about following the money, right? And we're in a situation where we have, in the state of Florida, privatized child protective services. And so Sally Smith, her team has a much higher rate of finding abuse than all other 66 county organizations do, right?
Facts. That's fact.
She also can then become a treating pediatrician for these,
and she
these
did.
kids, right?
And
so there's a conflict there, right?
Huge conflict. Huge conflict.
I mean, and again, that I didn't look at it. This is what I learned from watching streams like this. But it just seems like a big conflict that we have not even addressed. Certainly not in the case, because it was just tangential.
Right. All right. So, Jules, unless you have something else, I've got a few more points we can go over.
No, you can.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. All right. So then they got into video monitoring, right? So the reason they videoed poor Maya without her knowledge, because there were vast discrepancies. So the assistant risk manager approved that. Okay, that's what was said in the appeal, right?
Right.
And the theory is Beata may want to delete Maya. So Judge Smith asked, how is it in the best interest of the child to videotape her? And the answer was, there's no desire to create a fall. The idea was to find out about these discrepancies. So Stike-Leather was saying, look, we didn't want to recreate poor Maya falling down or falling out of the bed. We were hearing one thing and we wanted to videotape, for our own confirmation what was going on. So what do you think of that argument? Jules, Dr. Joe?
And that was a bold-faced lie, because in the trial it was brought out, especially where Sally Smith was concerned. Well, let's put her in a room alone because she can't keep up the act by herself for very long. So let's do that and see what happens. So what he said was a lie. Dr. Joe, your turn.
Well, I don't like using the L word, but it did not seem consistent with the approach that they took at the trial, right? I mean, they kept arguing that it was a medical procedure and it was ordered. No, it was not. It was nowhere in the orders.
The assistant risk manager approved it.
Right.
That's what he said. That's what he said. So do you remember from the trial, was that true, or was that factually stretching?
Well, if you remember, there was a sheet of paper with handwritten notes on it. And Mr. Hunter argued that the page was inadmissible because we didn't know who wrote it and what have you. And Judge Carroll, if I'm not mistaken, Jules, keep me honest here, I believe that Judge Carroll said, clearly this is a relevant document. We may not know the author, but we certainly know from whence it came, right? And so, I think that I don't know how anybody could try to justify that as a medically indicated procedure, right? And that's where the 15 hearings that finally pulled loose some of these text messages was particularly damning, because if I'm not mistaken, Greg in his cross-examination brought up the text messages where, Jules had the quote right. She can't keep up the charade, right? So they were confident that this little 10-year-old girl.
Yeah.
Think about being 10 years old, right?
Yeah.
How in the world could you possibly fake it for 90 days?
Right. You're ripped away from your family. You're in a hospital, cold, sterile environment. You're not with anybody that you know, care, or love about. And then, yeah, you're right. To your point, how are you that devious, JHACH, that you're going to come up with this plan?
And they can't use the excuse that she was being coached by Beata, because Beata by this time was way
out of the picture.
She wasn't even allowed in the hospital.
Yeah.
Phone calls were monitored. So, yeah.
I will tell you, having dealt with some victims of abuse where we intervened as mandatory reporters, when you can separate, and granted, I dealt with adults, not 10-year-olds, right? But I can tell you that when you separated the abuse victim from the abuser, the demeanor changed almost instantly, right? Not 100 days later, right? And again, this goes back to what I was saying before, Chris. This echo chamber just kept trying to prove that they were right, instead of at some point after a month, 6 weeks, 2 months, somebody should have said, shouldn't we have seen a change by now? Right? Where is the critical thinking, and where was that critical thinking allowed to surface? Now, again, maybe the critical thinking was there, but because of the culture, it wasn't welcomed into the conversation. Again, that's me speculating, but I have faith in healthcare workers. I've been very blessed to work with thousands of people who get up in the morning wanting to make a difference and wanting to do a great job. And so I've got to believe that there were people who had concerns, but just couldn't get a forum.
Yeah. Yeah. And if they said something, their supervisor would shoot it down or just not even entertain the idea, the thought. And then
the team was so insulated that an outside opinion just couldn't crack that shell, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's a shame. How large was that team? You've mentioned that a couple of times. Like, I'm envisioning there was like RNs coming and going. Was it just like a dedicated team of like 5 to 10 people, or how did that work? Do you know?
So I can't quantify it with any. I'm not good enough at math to quantify the actual size, but I will tell you that in multiple testimonies, multiple depositions, Chris, they talked about the clinical team, the administrative team, the social work team. Everything was about teams. There was no Chris. Chris was the one who told me I could do it.
Gotcha.
It was the team that Chris is on.
Gotcha.
Gave me the permission, right? Everything was about this team mentality. And listen, there are a lot of ways that works really, really well. But again, at the end of the day, there's got to be somebody who says, hey, team, we're playing on Sunday at 3:30 in the afternoon. Bring your cleats, right? Somebody's got to own that. Somebody's got to be accountable to that. And that's where things really broke down. And that's where, JHACH fought like mad to keep the immediate jeopardy story outside of the courthouse. And, it was a slip by Ethan Shapiro that opened the door to bring that testimony in, to bring that fact pattern in. And, my frustration, again, had I gotten involved with the Kowalski family earlier, I think that I could have maybe helped Anderson, Glenn, Greg and Nick take a different tack on some of these arguments. But, quite candidly, we were as Team Maya, we were fortunate that Mr. Shapiro opened that door and allowed the testimony in, because it was so critical. The IJ really centered around one program, the cardiac surgery program. They had a higher than usual death rate. They had needles left behind inside, a conscious decision to leave a needle inside an infant's heart, right? There were decisions being made in that specific program. And that was, in fact, what caused the survey, which resulted in the IJ. But, you know, they say fish stink from the head down, right? It's unfathomable that you can have that kind of disarray, and it was only limited to this isolated program.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It really spoke to the issue of culture and accountability, which again, the guy from Baltimore who came in and relieved the CEO, he was the one on videotape at a town hall described the culture as being toxic and based on retaliation or retribution. Right.
Yeah.
So the Joint Commission said that there was a problem here. The incoming CEO, a longtime Hopkins employee, confirmed it. All I did was relay that messaging to the jury.
Yeah. Have you seen, and if you can't talk about this, just let me know. Have you seen any changes in JHACH since this trial?
Sadly, no. But I will also tell you there may be changes that have taken place or are taking place that are just beyond my visibility.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
But,
I wanted to ask it.
Well, you know, one of the things that I don't even know that it made it into the trial testimony, but it was a prominent part of Dr. Perno and Dr. Napolitano's depositions. They both said that once Johns Hopkins became owner of the hospital, quote, nothing changed. Hopkins didn't bring in new quality focus. They didn't bring in new programs on patient safety. They didn't institute any changes to make the system run better. It really, if you listen to their deposition, and I don't know if those are public or not, but if you read through their deposition, if you listen to their depositions, it seemed more of a branding exercise than it was in terms of a cultural takeover, right?
Yeah.
They changed the sign on the roof, but nothing underneath the roof, right? And it's such a shame. I mean, to the point, Chris, where, and again, it's 2 years since I've really looked at it, but you know, the Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital, number one, is the only Hopkins property outside of the state of, outside of the mid-Atlantic, primarily the state of Maryland. But number two, it was the only, if I'm not mistaken, it was the only hospital board that didn't report up to the board in Baltimore, right? They really kind of kept it as this appendage, this little pet down in St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And they did not, Perno and Napolitano, both, I mean, to summarize, they didn't really get much in terms of clinical change, clinical support, safety, quality. None of that really changed when Hopkins became the owners.
Wow.
And what a shame, because I will tell you, at the time that it happened, my kids were in pre-K to early education years. Right? They were the ones who, when I heard Hopkins was taking over All Children's, which is the dominant, you know, that is the pediatric hospital for this coast. As a parent, I was thrilled to learn that it was really just kind of a, you know, see the bird on the wall, you know, it was very disappointing.
How many hospitals does Johns Hopkins have then in Florida?
In Florida, still only one.
Just the one, okay. And then across the country?
Again, they've got, I want to say half a dozen plus or minus in the state of Maryland. I don't know if they've extended beyond there. Candidly, I haven't looked.
Sure, sure. Because I'm just wondering, okay, so the one in Jacksonville, or was it Jacksonville?
No, that's Mayo.
Oh, that's me. Okay. So the
Yeah.
one down here is in Tampa.
St. Petersburg.
St. Petersburg. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that it seems like it's operating, or it was operating, like in this vacuum, like you were saying, that committee was not, that board of directors was not answering to the board of directors above them.
Yeah.
So
and if you go back and you look at the articles from, I want to say it was 2011, I think it was April Fool's Day of 2011, when Hopkins became the owners of the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
If you read the articles leading up to that transition, Chris, there's statements from members of the board and from, folks in the community who talked about that they were really looking forward to this association as a way to improve the quality of care and to, bring some, not only stability, but real leadership in children's healthcare to our community.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the pre-Hopkins board, again, was very well intentioned, and they were very intentional about choosing a legendary partner in Hopkins. I mean, let's face it, Hopkins medicine, number one on a lot of lists, top 5 on almost everybody's list, right?
Yeah.
So, if you're going to dance, they're a great partner to dance with, but they just did not, from what the testimony supports, they didn't really bring much of benefit to the medical staff, to the nursing staff, or to the community in terms of boosting quality and boosting patient safety.
Right. And now they have this on their record that they have to answer to.
Yeah. And isn't it amazing that they still haven't really answered to it?
And that's where I have a problem, because I would think that the board of directors would not want this to go as far as it did. I mean, a $260 somewhat million verdict against them. And yes, Judge Carroll, weeded it down, but it's still 200 million plus you've got the interest that is like 20 million now. Why? I don't understand why they are not instructing these lawyers to say, stop, you're costing us more money. Stop.
I would think $55,000 a day in interest, right?
Wow. Yeah. Is that what it is? Yeah. I would think just from the PR standpoint alone, that it would be, well, I know they've tried. I know Greg has tried several times to come to a decision with them. And what was the last time they were there for like 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Or something ridiculous like that.
And that was after the verdict, Chris.
Right.
Yeah. Right. There's a scene from one of the Rocky movies where the manager is screaming, throw in the damn towel. Yeah. And and I've shared this. This is not an exclusive for you, Chris or Jules, but I prepared for each step along the way, but I didn't really dig into the case and prepare for trial testimony until after the jury was seated, because I couldn't believe that after 3 months of Take Care of Maya being the #1 documentary on Netflix, and with this horrifying story that was told over the next 8.5 weeks. I mean, they knew what the story was. They knew that, they knew that it was going to be uphill sledding. Right. And they're from what I understand, there were never any really meaningful offers to settle this.
No, not at all. No.
They could have, I just couldn't believe that they wanted the story on, to be front page news. Oh, and don't forget People Magazine. Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. From a PR standpoint, this is a nightmare. I mean, there's a old saying, there's no such thing as bad PR, but in this case, this is really bad PR.
It's pretty close. Yeah. And Jules, you're exactly right to point to the board, because at the end of the day, the board is the most accountable part of the organization. The problem, as I helped point out on that last day of trial testimony, was it was very apparent that information wasn't getting from the front line to Jackie Crane, from Jackie Crane to, I can't remember the CEO's name first, and it appears that there was not information getting to the board either, right? So, but here's the problem, and this is something that I tried to articulate with the jury, and I think they understood it. As someone who has had dozens of direct reports, I rely on them bringing me information. But if they're not bringing me everything, I have to pull the information up, right? And, and that's just a matter of communication, style, and ownership, right? So there's a push of information from the front line to the administrative manager, owner, executive. But there also has to be a pull of information, right? You've got to ask questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Absolutely.
you just can't blindly accept that you're being told everything. Mm-hmm. That is poor management. That's naive. That's just naive.
I hope internally they have done things to correct this. Again, we don't know because we're not privy to that, but I do hope something has been done or is being done. And it might take until the judgment is served, maybe finally. I don't know. I'm just wishful thinking. I don't know.
I don't know either, but I can tell you this, and I think Dr. Joe will back me up on it. I'm not going to throw Ethan Shapiro under the bus. Not tonight. I won't. Because he was quite cordial.
The views expressed by Jules don't necessarily reflect this of this channel.
Exactly.
Although, keep in mind, he is the one that gave her the nickname Notorious Jules.
Yes, I know.
Which I was going to ask him last week why.
You were smart not to, but
I know. You would have kicked me if I did.
Let sleeping dogs lie.
Where I was going was that one particular person has not changed their attitude. The way they look at this case, the way they look at us, and I'm just going to say it. Howard Hunter. He still has so much anger in him. I'm afraid he's going to give himself a stroke if he just doesn't get over it.
Yeah, I will just say that my conversation with Ethan Shapiro was much more cordial than any conversation that I had with Mr. Hunter that day. Chris, walking in, the first person I saw when I walked into the building was Jules. And then I saw Mr. Shapiro and then walking into the courtroom, Nick was there, Greg was there, Dr. Kirkpatrick was there. I recognized Tom Elliott and Amy Farrier, who were handling the appeals. They were counterbalancing Chris Aldenbrand, right? Aldenburn, sorry. I recognized Mike Tanner. I'd not met him before, but I recognized a lot of people.
Yeah, Childers was there.
He was?
Yeah. I got introduced to him. Didn't you get introduced to him?
Jeff Childers?
He was down to the left. Why are you looking at me like that? Who did they introduce me to then?
Oh boy.
I don't know, but I don't think
I think he had a yellow. I think was it a yellow? I can't remember. Why is yellow sticking in my head? I think he wore a yellow shirt.
I don't know that, but
I'll have to check with Nick on that.
But bottom line is that Chris, there was a real sense in the room of, it was almost like a high school reunion in a sense that these are people that. It was more like when you play a tough game against somebody and you see the team in a different venue, right?
Sure.
This was a hard fought trial. And there were a lot of emotions and there was a lot of energy. but that was then. This is a whole different setting. And there really was just, I mean, I think there was a general sense that, you know what, we're in a business, guys, and we were all just doing our jobs, but we're still decent human beings. Mostly, Jules, we're decent human beings.
Mostly.
Mostly. But you have to admit, at the end of the hearing, after the justices left the bench and we were mulling around, generally on the one side of the courtroom appeared very jovial, and the other side appeared very morose.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if you think my assessment's wrong, tell me. You know, you can tell me if you're wrong.
No, I will tell you candidly, I didn't scout around the room at that point. I was kind of laser focused on just introducing myself to Mike Tanner and saying thank you for representing the family, right? Because, you know, with all the stuff that's going on with the, you know, change of representation and the divorce between Greg and Nick and what have you, I was really just relieved and very happy to see somebody who was just there to help Maya be heard. My favorite part of the entire trial experience was I wasn't there for it. I saw it on TV like everybody else did. Maya came out with her dad and her brother, and somebody from the press put a microphone in front of her.
Family painter.
And her statement was, I feel like I have finally been heard. And I thought that Mike Tanner helped Maya be heard that day. And so, Jules, I didn't have the same observation as you about jovial and morose, but I wasn't looking, right? You don't find what you don't look for, right? I was kind of laser targeted on, I want to go thank Mr. Tanner for being there for Maya.
Yeah. I was the complete opposite. My eyes constantly was looking in that direction because I wanted to see how they all were interacting with each other. And, you know, to Ethan Shapiro's credit, even after the hearing was over, you know, while we were still in there, he was smiling, you know, and he was talking to people. And I mean, he even said to me, it was nice to see you again. I probably could have dropped dead right then and there. But others were not. And mostly, you know, Mr. Hunter, he does not hide he's like me. He doesn't hide his facial expressions or his feelings very well. And I noticed when we were leaving, you and he were coming out the door at the same time, and you, as graciously, I'm telling you, Dr. Joe is the gentleman, reached out to shake his hand.
Actually, I tried to shake his hand prior to. And we did exchange a handshake. I would say that I was probably more enthusiastic about the handshake than he was, but yeah.
I got a scowl because I was going out the door and he was coming this way, and I held the door, but I stopped on purpose and I looked at him. I said, "How are you today, Mr. Hunter?" I got nothing. I just got that. With that red face and his glasses. Like
our conversation was extremely brief.
Yes.
Just leave it at that.
Yes.
I was going to say we watch a lot of trials and we see, like you made the analogy, like in the game, it's dog eat dog and they're throwing, you know, daggers at each other. But then, you know, when the judge calls for a recess and the camera's still in the courtroom, you'll see them go and they'll talk and they'll laugh and they'll even shake hands or whatever, you know, and you can really sense that it is just a job. But sometimes I would think it would be hard to separate yourself from that when you're representing somebody like mine. You know what I'm
Yes,
saying?
but there's a thing, Chris, that I don't know, because I don't believe that this had come out at trial. And Dr. Joe helped me here. I do know it's in court filings because I read them. Howard Hunter was bending over backwards to try to get Maya transferred out of JHACH up to, I believe it was Pennsylvania. I might have the state wrong.
Baltimore, Maryland, or Pennsylvania.
Yeah, somewhere up there. Yeah, he did not. He right to the very end, he did not want Maya to go back to her father.
Well, and if I'm not mistaken, and I did not read it, Jules, but if I'm not mistaken, I remember hearing on one of the programs, maybe Megan was talking about that even after Beata left the family, that there was a question in the courtroom about whether she would be repatriated or not. And if I'm not mistaken, Megan represented that it was Mr. Hunter who argued against it when there was a lot of sentiment to reunite, because the grief that this, and she was an 11-year-old by then, as if they can handle grief better, right? But yeah, it seemed to be the humane thing to do, but as I understand, there was still a push to get her to go to Maryland or Pennsylvania or wherever that.
Yeah, wherever. I know it was Ohio. It was somewhere up
It
north.
was well outside the state of Florida, and it was well away from Kyle and Jack.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as much as my statement of, how can you not feel something when you're representing somebody like Maya, then on the opposite side, how can you feel something when you're against her? How yes, I understand it's a job, and we say that a lot about defense attorneys. It's like, how can you go home at night and look yourself in the mirror knowing full well that this person did what they did? Well, it's your job, and I understand all that. So I do question that. That runs across my mind of like, people
If they had just if they just played fair, Chris, when the whole thing of that IJ report came up, I mean, Howard Hunter practically had a stroke inside the courtroom over that. And Judge Carroll was ticked off to no end. And yes, that falls on Shapiro. He did open the door with that question to that guy. It's gotten all the reports. Well, but what they did was they tailored certain stuff to him to make his representation to the jury that was not factually correct. And to this day, and Dr. Joe can correct me if I'm wrong, but to this day, that report has not surfaced.
That is correct. Full stop. I don't need to correct you. You're correct.
Yep. We can move on. Do you guys want to get to some questions?
Sure.
Want to answer some questions? Aaron, do you want to pull some up, or do you want me to go through them? What do you think?
And Chris, one of the things to your point about, shaking hands and what have you, one of the rules on my YouTube channel was always, we can disagree without being disagreeable. Right. And, so I will admit that I'm a big fan of Ronald Reagan. He was kind of the first president during my adulthood. And famously, Ronald Reagan, being a right of center Republican, fought tooth and nail with Patrick Tip O'Neill, the Speaker of the House from Massachusetts, who was very left of center. And they would fight like dogs around legislation. And then more often than not, Tip O'Neill was in the Oval Office at the end of the day having a cocktail with Ronald Reagan, right? They were politically, diametrically opposed, but they were still civil to one another, and they were still friendly to one another because they were doing their jobs. They had different viewpoints on the world, and
Yep.
they had different viewpoints on world events, but they were still civil about it. They were
Yeah.
disagreeing without being
Sure.
disagreeable.
Well, I think is what's the saying? I may disagree with what you're saying, but I'll fight for your right to say it.
There you go,
You
Patrick
know,
Henry.
pretty
Right,
much, right?
right. Well
All right, we
said.
have a. Sorry, I was going to say we have a couple questions coming in.
Sure.
OnlyFans says, "How much of it was misguided belief? Do you think on behalf of JHACH?" And if you don't want to answer any questions, just let me know.
First of all, the handle cracks me up.
Yes, he's one of our fantastic mods, and
Yeah,
we tease him a lot about OnlyFan.
I don't know how much of it was misguided belief. I do think that they have been counseled that this was winnable at every step of the way. And again, I would go back and ask the question that Jules asked before: is is there not some discussion at the board level of like, what are we doing here? We are now 8 years into this. What are we doing here? Right? How did we get here? So, I and again, OnlyFan, I don't think that the culture at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital allowed them to have that kind of an honest discussion.
Mhm. Understood. There's a comment before. Do you want me to bring that up or no? I'll leave that up to your discretion.
I'm on StreamYard, so I can't see the
You
comments.
can't see it. Okay.
Yeah.
I see what it is.
Should we?
You could bring it up, and I'm going to take Dr. Joe off the hook, and I'll answer it.
Okay. So Don Eck says, "Are the Andersons totally out of the picture now?"
Listen, my stance is I loved both sides. Okay. This is a divorce as Dr. Joe refers to it, a relationship that has gone sideways. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't know. There was a hearing scheduled for March 6th, and it now has been pushed back to April 7th in regards to this. I don't know. If Anderson Glenn law firm is out, they may be out just as far as representing the family going forward, but they're still going to have to be paid. They've earned their money and they will have to be paid. That's my stance on that.
Okay, fair enough. Kerviel asks, do you have any thoughts or opinions on the Kushner situation or case? No, I'm not familiar with that. So are you guys familiar with that one?
That's the woman from the Ukraine, correct, Dr.
Correct.
Joe?
Yeah. Yeah. And Kerviel, I'm sorry. I know that she testified during the Maya trial at the kind of towards the end of the Kowalski's presentation. But personally, I have never been involved in the Kushner case, and I have not been privy to follow it. So unfortunately, I can't offer you any thoughts or opinions about it.
Yeah, I don't even know what the details are in that case, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, sorry, Kerviel. Is it something we need to pay attention to here at Trial TV Live? Should we check into it?
We could, but I don't think that there's anything. I don't think there's anything out there yet.
Okay. Fair enough. Kerviel does a follow-up. Thank you. Appreciate it. It almost seems way worse than Maya's situation.
As I recall, in many ways it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And it may be worth trying to reach out to Greg and or Nick to see if either one of them are still handling it. Because as I recall, Chris, it was a similarly tragic case.
Okay. Fair enough. Not seeing many questions. Our chat's a little docile. Oh, wait, did you see one? I just pulled up Ken's.
No, do Ken, and then I'm going to throw something at Dr. Joe.
Oh, okay. All right. Ken Rosenberg says, I didn't watch much of the trial, but from what I saw, I always had the sense that Mr. Shapiro stood in contrast in some way compared to the rest of his team.
I wish
Yes.
I wish I could ask Ken to expound on that. But Jules, it looks like you have a response for him. Candidly, Ken, I'm not sure exactly what the question is about here. So
Ethan Shapiro from day one of the trial was never like if he was cross-examining one of Greg's witnesses, he was never antagonistic. Even with Maya, he was very gentle with her. That's what I came away with. Okay, and things started to change with him the closer we got to the end of trial. Out of all of their personalities, I feel that Ethan Shapiro had the best personality then. But once he dragged me into it, no, everything was off the table by then. But truly, he was very, even when speaking to Judge Carroll, when Judge Carroll had questions for him, he never got antagonistic with Judge Carroll. He was always respectful. Where, I hate throwing Howard Hunter's name out there, but him and Miss Krells were very antagonistic with Judge Carroll. And but yeah, somehow I don't know how Ethan Shapiro got to the dark side by end of trial. I mean, he did tell me to get a life.
Well, Jules, remember that Judge Carroll called out Howard towards the end of the trial and said, "Don't look at me that way."
Yeah, that was
bad. Do not talk to me that way, right?
Yeah,
it was
like that. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was really bad.
Yeah.
But Dr. Joe, I have been getting lots of questions in regards to your channel. I even got requests from people, and some of the people here in this chat. Will you please post some sort of a message on your community page just so people can say hello to you and how much they miss you and love you and can't wait for you to come back? And when will you be back?
Jules, thank you so much. Yes, I will. Yes, I will. Yes, I will post something when we disconnect tonight. I will post something. Awesome. It won't be a lot because it's the end of a long day. But yes, I will do something. And I appreciate all the comments. Krista, oh, God bless you. Thank you so much. Krista, I have to tell you, the love and support that I have felt from the LawTube community, from the trial watching community, from the Team Maya community, has been such a support for me. My family was very, very, very happy. My wife, both kids, very, very happy to kick 2024 to the curb. I mean, we were so happy to just see that year go away. We lost a house at the beach. We lost our garage storage unit, 3 cars, a lot of my wife's business equipment for her catering business are gone. We lost 2 brothers-in-law. 2024 was just a brutally difficult year. And there was also, some retaliation and retribution stuff taking place that I'm still trying to navigate through. But 2024 is over. I am, Jules, thank you for asking. I'm very, very, very happy to share that I'm planning on being live again on a weekly basis recurring basis, at least weekly, starting in mid to late March. I will. So yes, I want to get the band back together again. I've actually had conversations with the mods and with Sally, who did an amazing job with all my graphics. And so yeah, we're getting the band back together again. And I know that there's still a lot of conversation around Maya and the appeals and what's next and how did we get here. So that will still continue to be a topic of conversation, but I also would like to, I would like to believe that I can also help people understand a lot of the changes that are going to be coming to healthcare with the disruption that is going to be a characteristic of the Trump White House and the, Bobby Kennedy being at HHS and, with all the changes around making America healthy again. I'm hoping that I can help people understand it. And one of the phrases that I used to use a lot with my patients was, we want to figure out not how just to survive, but how to thrive in the new world, right? And I'd like to be that person. So yes, I will post something and more to come, but baby, I'm back next month. Yes.
Also, he's too humble to say this, but tomorrow, Dr. Joe and Mrs. Joe, Patty, they are flying out. You don't mind that I say this, do you? I'll shut up if you want me to.
No, it's okay. I'm a proud girl, Dad. I'm a very proud.
Yeah. His daughter is getting an award in Texas. Why don't you expound on that? Because I know that you are so proud of your daughter.
I am extraordinarily proud of my kids. And so my daughter is a fourth-year student in a program called Creative. And Creative is a combination of marketing, advertising, and brand management. And one of her student projects was submitted by her professor to the professional organization. It's called the AAF. I don't know what it stands for. But my daughter and her student project for a brand of nonstick cookware called Calphalon has earned an Addy Award, which in her industry is like winning an Oscar or winning an Emmy, winning a Grammy. It's enormous. And so I'm super duper proud of my little baby girl winning this award that some people in the industry, many people in the industry never even submit for one. And she's won as a student, which I just think is spectacular. So here's the funny part. And Jules, I don't know that Patty's going to be thrilled that I tell this part, but so
I already know it though.
So we said to our daughter, "Hey, honey, when is this award show? We're coming out." And she said, "Well, I only get one ticket." So my wife says, "Well, take Daddy. He will be so proud of you. He will be the loudest cheerleader. He will just, it'll burst his heart. He'll be so happy for you." She said, "Mom, I'm not going to take Dad. I'm going to take my professor because my dad will cheer for me and he'll make me feel like $1 million, but my professor will know everybody in that room who's hiring." So
smart, very smart.
I guess I could be upset that she doesn't want me there, but I can't question her strategic thinking on it. So Jules, thanks for letting me brag a little bit on your programs. Thank you, Chris.
Sure.
Yeah,
she's a smart one. Well, as a graphic designer, I wish her all the luck in the world, and we know all about the Addy Awards, so that's a high accomplishment. That's a high accomplishment.
Well, as I told her, I think your resume just changed, right? So she works really, really hard. And what's really neat, Chris, is, there was a time, and maybe, I didn't realize that you were in graphics. Maybe you suffered something like this, but in high school, in grade school, the teachers used to make fun of her. She's a very visual thinker, always has been. They made fun of her and they called her Rainbow Bright because she, one teacher called her out in front of all the other kids, said, why do you need a yellow highlighter and an orange highlighter and a blue highlighter and a green highlighter and a pink hat? And Caroline was reduced to tears.
Yeah.
Well, son of a gun. Now she has found a profession where that's a feature, not a bug, right?
Absolutely.
That
Absolutely.
is a superpower, is her ability to think visually. So I'm just thrilled. Listen, you always want your kids to be confident, and you want them to have an ability to be successful. And it's just really reassuring to know that maybe, just maybe, your parenting, you got a couple of things right. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
That is great. And just to answer Dawn's question, Dr. Joe, will you be reviving your channel? We spoke to that, but if you want to give it.
Yes.
One more shout out.
Date is TBD, but it will be in the second half of March. I'm aiming for the week of, I want to say it's March 19th or something like that week. And what I'm hoping to do is more interviews. But one of the changes that I'm really striving for, Chris and Jules, is to make the channel even more interactive. We always had questions through chat and super chats and what have you. But I'm working with some folks who are a lot better at this than I am, to figure out how can we get actual conversation started. Because listen, I would get bored listening to me for an hour, right? But
not us.
But a conversation, because what I want to be able to do, Jules, just like you and I and Chris have been, we've been responding to one another in real time. And that's really what I want to do with the audience. I want the audience to be right here at center stage. So we're working on it. It won't be perfect when we launch, but we are going to strive every day to make a real connection and continue to make a difference.
Great.
This may be a little premature, but we touched on this a few months back, Chris, with Luigi Mangione. We do have serious issues in this country with our healthcare. I do not believe unaliving a CEO is the answer to that. Right. And I'm hoping, Dr. Joe, that one of your shows will address the problems with healthcare. And for us people, I don't know if you can or if you can't, but if you can, to help us navigate the healthcare system, because I will talk to you when you get back from Texas, because now I have to re-navigate everything. So.
Well, and Jules, I hope that, and thank you, Lily, for your comment. That was very sweet of you. Jules, I think you remember that a lot of our programs were around helping people navigate the system. I mean, one of the most amazing stories that I love to think about, when because I always, in my practice of medicine and as a chief medical officer, I've always preached about what I call capital I impact, right? Really, not just influencing me, really making a difference for patients, right? Keeping them safe, getting them better outcomes, right? One of the stories that I think comes the closest to capital I impact from the brief time that I had the channel running was Annie, the 15-year-old up in Pennsylvania who had scoliosis, and she went to see the expert in her part of Eastern Pennsylvania, and the doctor is saying, this is what we're going to do, and this is how you're going to feel, and this is what's going to happen. And she stood up for herself and said, I'd like you to consider a less invasive procedure for me. And the doctor was just like, who the heck are you? I'm the doctor here. I'm the chair of the department. I'm the expert. We're going to do what I'm telling you. So she and her mom got into the car driving home, and the mom said, where in the world did that come from, Annie? And little 15-year-old Annie said, well, Mom, when I'm in the other room doing my homework and I know you're watching that guy on YouTube, Dr. Joe, And he talks about advocating for yourself. She said, I was listening to this doctor tell me what I didn't, that was not what I wanted to hear. And so I advocated for myself. I stood up and I challenged her. And so Annie and her mom reached out to me via email and told me that story. And, to me, that was just the greatest joy ever. And the best part of it is that I did help them identify some alternative care. Where they are in northeastern PA, they have access to Philadelphia, to New York, to Boston. And they did in fact find another surgeon who was willing to have that conversation. And that surgeon was, oh, by the way, chair of Shriners Hospital, which is an orthopedic center of excellence. So this wasn't just some schlep that they found that was willing to consider it. So that to me is capital I impact. And so Jules, 100%, I'm on board with what you just asked about, for sure.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And I just want to pull up this again, just in case you're just listening and not watching. Dr. Joe's YouTube channel is at CMO Dr. Joe.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. I appreciate the plug. Thank you.
Easy. And you had mentioned something about getting the band back together. Sorry, Jules, but
that's right.
I texted my wife Erin maybe half hour, an hour ago, and I said, from this angle, I said, Dr. Joe looks like Paul McCartney. And she's like, oh, you got to tell him that. You got to tell him that. So,
well, thank you. Of course, Paul McCartney is a couple years older than me, so maybe I should be doing something about the circles around my eyes. But
Paul,
I appreciate
Paul is like 75, 78.
He is the ageless Beatle, right?
Yeah. I say circa 1980, Paul McCartney.
For sure. Thank you. I just want to know who this cattail is that keeps going by.
This is my trusty little sidekick. This is Super Ball.
Oh, I love
That's Super Ball.
Well, Chris, I frequently have Charlie on my show, who's a 12-year-old rescue Havanese Shih Tzu mix. And,
there you go.
But Charlie is actually up with my son, providing emotional support for a very tough week of midterms. So we are dog free for the next couple of days.
Do you miss it, or do you feel a sense of sort of freedom a little bit, or do you miss having the furry one around you?
Well, I'm the one who, so it's, first of all, it is my kid's dog, right? I've never been a pet owner in my life. I was in my 50s when we got Charlie. So, so it is definitely my children's dog. And yet magically, Hattie's the one who feeds him and gets him groomed, and I'm the one who walks him and picks up his poo. Yep. So I will tell you, for a short break, and especially with us going to Texas over the next couple of days, I don't miss him one bit. But he's, he has been an amazing addition to our family. And candidly, Chris, we went to the rescue looking for a proper sized dog, mid-sized to larger dog. And we looked at a bunch, but there was this little fur ball over in the corner. Charlie was only 6 weeks old when we met him. And he was not the rescue. His mom was the rescue. And his mom was taken out of a hoarder's house in Miami, in South Florida. And she was so emaciated that the rescue, the folks at the rescue didn't even realize she was about to litter. And she littered 5 puppies. One died shortly after birth. 2 boys, 2 girls, and we got Charlie. We got the best of the litter, I'm sure.
That's fantastic.
He's been great.
Jules, we need Frankie. Sorry to cut you off. We need Frankie.
Gosh, he heard you.
Frankie around?
There he is.
But listen, everybody, I know that you guys want Dr. Joe back in the worst way, just like I do. But in the meantime, while he is waiting to get his channel up and running again, his videos are still there. Go and watch them. He's had interview with juror number 1, and who I thought was juror number 7, and his wife. He's got interviews with Greg Anderson. He's got an interview with me.
And Nick Whitney and
yes, with Nick.
Fantastic.
So yeah, go give them a watch. I mean, if you've got nothing to do, just go watch them and leave a comment or two, and he'll be back.
And we had a lot of technical difficulties that night. I guess the internet wasn't that solid in Northeast Pennsylvania, but we did in fact interview Annie and her mom about her scoliosis. And yeah,
Fantastic.
And again, they're two of my favorite people that have ever watched the channel, and they are inspiring to me to this day.
That's great. That's so great to hear. And I think stories like that make you appreciate what you're doing, and then hearing it from you, it makes us appreciate what you're doing. You know,
thanks.
Yeah,
Chris.
it's just nice to be a part of the community, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah,
it's just nice to be part of this community. So
and helping, right?
Yeah,
helping. Yeah,
actually affecting change in a positive way.
Yeah.
And it's a pleasant change. It's a pleasant change from true crime. and lawsuit.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Well, I'll ask this one more question before we wrap it up or let you guys go. Like, what do you do to decompress from true crime? Now, I don't know, Dr. Joe, do you watch as much as we do? Are you always on YouTube watching?
Does anybody watch as much as you guys do?
Probably not. Probably not.
Yeah.
Do you disconnect from, well, how about when you were practicing, or are you still practicing? I'm not sure.
No, sir.
Okay.
No,
So
I had an injury about 20 years ago, and I lost my ability to practice.
Fair enough. So then what did you do, if you don't mind me asking, what did you do to disconnect from your work when you came home? Did you just spend time with your family, I would assume? And
when I started practice, I used to do a lot of exercise as my diversion. But as I got older and softer, it really became about my wife and my kids.
Gotcha.
I grew up in a big family, but we weren't necessarily a warm and fuzzy family. We are definitely a warm and fuzzy family, to the point where my daughter, who used to run into my arms when she was a child, her now most common phrase is, "Dad, too much touching." She's but no, I do enjoy spending a lot of time, as much time as I can, with my kids and with my wife. And it's funny, we are empty nesters, and we're not ashamed to say we actually enjoy it a lot more than we thought we would, because we sit together in the morning and have coffee, and we just kind of get caught up for the day and what have you. And we never had that when the kids were in the house and had to get off to school and everything else. And with my kids, I 30 years ago, I swore off the game of golf. I thought it was just a stupid game that took way too much time. But I have taken the game back up about 13, 14 months ago now, because my son started playing. And I realized, Chris, as the older I got, the older he got, if I'm going to spend time with him, there better be a fairway in front of us. And so I have humbled myself to go through that embarrassing learning process, but it's how I spend time with him. And Caroline and I are big hockey fans, so every chance we get, we're watching a game together. So
nice.
That's so incredible. I said to Dr. Joe, I don't know if I said it last week or the week before, whenever, but I give Patty, and those of you who don't know who Patty is, that is his lovely wife. She's his lovely wife. I could not be married to an OBGYN. And I told Dr. Joe that. I do not know how Patty tolerated being married to, because no offense, I mean, we need OBGYNs. We need them. Yeah. But me, I wouldn't want to be married to one. And, she understood his profession, and she's just a lovely human being. Yeah.
That's very sweet of you to say, but I don't know
so she know how she did it though.
Well, Patty actually considers herself to be an MD. She's married to a doctor, and there are times
Nice.
there are times when I would wake up from a nap or early in the morning, and I'd hear her on the phone. And Chris, she would actually be talking to patients and giving them, okay, so you haven't felt the baby move. What I want you to do is I want you to I want you to go into the kitchen and eat something. And if you can find an apple or a banana, something that gives you, and you're just trying to give the baby some sugar. And then I want you to lay on your left. And she said it word for word as I would, because she heard me say it hundreds of times.
Sure.
So, I asked her to curtail that because, practicing medicine without a license, that
Exactly.
whole thing,
Yep.
But it's funny because, just like, Jules knows Patty more vicariously than through direct contact. So did my patients. They knew her and they trusted her. So it's been an amazing 27 years together. We are celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary this summer. And,
nice. Congratulations.
Somehow, thank you. Somehow she still loves me. And,
in spite of yourself.
I just think she's amazing. So,
well, speaking of Patty,
that's fantastic.
Speaking of Patty, Dr. Joe, give Patty a plug.
Oh, yes.
Give her a plug.
So Jules is referring to the Breakfast Company. The Breakfast Company has 4 locations in Sarasota and Bradenton on the Gulf Coast of Florida today. And by mid-April, there will be location number 5 in Sarasota's Rosemary District. It's on Orange Avenue, 1 block north of Fruitville. But what's really cool about it is it's on a corner. And as you stand on the corner and look south, you see the old El Greco Cafe, which is the restaurant that Patty and her dad had 30 years ago when I met her, before I met her. But so and the Breakfast Company is really, it's breakfast and lunch only, but it is really just kind of a slobbering tribute to Patty's dad, my papu, it's funny. He was not subtle. He was an immigrant from Greece. He grew up in a very small town north of Kalamata, where the olives come from. He was just a really, really fantastic fellow. And he loved me more than I had a right to. But the funniest thing was he was not subtle about the fact that if Patty and I ever got into a fight, he was on Team Joe.
Oh boy, how did Patty feel about that?
Let's move on.
Yeah. Okay. Next.
But we're really excited about having that location. I mean, practically and figuratively in the shadow of George's restaurant.
That's fantastic.
And and a lot of his recipes are still in play today, and it's pretty exciting.
So good. So good. And I mean, so good. And ask Scott from Recovery Addict. He ate there too. He's home with those giant ass cinnamon buns that are made from scratch. But my favorite is the chicken lemon soup.
Oh, I've got lemon. It's funny. Patty just got a towel delivered today. There's a I don't know if it's a website or what, but I think it's called like Yaya's. Yaya's something. Yeah, and she got a towel from this company, and it says, "When life gives you lemon, make Avgo Lemino." Wow. It's brilliant. It's actually hanging up on our stove right now. But no, but that Avgo Lemino chicken lemon rice soup that recipe is her dad's. And what's kind of neat is, Craville, you'll let me know when you're there with your girlfriend. It's interesting because I actually had somebody reach out to me via the Ask CMO Dr. Joe email, and said, "Hey, we are trial watchers, and the trial that we are following this year, we are going." And so these are 3 girlfriends. I think they're from Indiana, and they go from once a year, they go in the footprints of some famous trial. And so they chose the Maya trial, and they went to the courthouse in Venice, and they went to, all the locations they went to All Children's Hospital, but they contacted me because they were hoping that I could meet them at the restaurant. And I couldn't. I was out of town for a board meeting when they were here, but they did have a very nice breakfast. And yes, I sent cinnamon rolls over to the place. And Shannon, the manager at that store, did a great a great job of making them feel comfortable and welcome. So it's kind of neat.
Yeah, we had a great time with me, you, Scott, Alicia, the cake lady. And
I just found that photograph on my iPad a couple of days ago. Yeah, I didn't realize I had it. Yeah. I'll have to send it to you.
We had a great time, and the food is amazing. Yeah. So anybody that's in Florida, if you end up over in Southwest Florida, please go and check out the Breakfast Company. If you're not from Florida, but you intend on paying a visit to Florida, believe me, I would not steer you wrong. Okay. You need to go to the Breakfast Company. Which location was I at? I don't remember which one it was.
You were at the Landings, which is in kind of just south of downtown Sarasota.
Okay. Yeah. So, but they will make you feel welcomed and loved, and the food
It's interesting because the T-shirts that all the staff wear on the back are three of, Patty's dad's name was George, and three of his core beliefs were work hard, family first, and be kind. And that's really what we try to do at each of the stores. And it's interesting. You still get people complaining. I always laugh when the complaint is we couldn't have a conversation because they kept coming by to refill our coffee. Well, most places you can't get a refill of coffee. So if that's our fault, we'll own that.
That's not a bad one to take on for sure. Kerrville asked, which one is the one to go to? Anyone, or is there one specifically? Or
they're all good, but Kerrville, if you're coming up from Fort Myers, there's two that are right off of I-75. One is at University, across the street from University Town Center, and the other one is just two stops up in Bradenton. That's the original at State Road 70. So those are probably the easiest for you to get to if you're coming up from Fort Myers.
Yeah, I would say the original.
Google is your friend.
Yeah,
Google Maps. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, Jules. Next time I come to visit, whether it's for a trial or just in general, definitely we will go.
Absolutely.
Well, and I would love to be able to meet you there.
Yes.
Yeah, we didn't have time during the Ashley Benefield trial. I mean, it was chaotic because we went from Sarah Boone. We went from one end of the state to the other end of the state in 24 hours. So we couldn't get over to the Breakfast Company, but for sure. I definitely will make sure Chris gets over there.
Well, Jules, it's not going to happen right away, but I will tell you, we are scouting locations in Tampa where you now live. So.
Interesting.
Tell Patty I love her.
Stand in line, lady. Stand in line.
Ask Patty. Tell her Jules wants to know, does she get a family discount?
Oh, for sure. For sure.
I'm just kidding.
100%.
No, that's good. So oh, that's awesome, because I would love for my son and I would love to take my family there, because I really do believe that they would totally enjoy.
Thanks. The family works hard, and there's always a family member in each location, which is kind of cool. So wasn't Patty's nephew there the day I was there? I think Patty's nephew, Dimitri he's really the brains behind it. Dimitri's a wicked smart kid, and he's really hardworking, and he went to NYU undergraduate. Got a master's at Johns Hopkins University, and then went to law school and graduated top of his class, or top 10 of his class, from University of Miami Law School. So he's a very educated line cook. scrambles your eggs. So,
Probably one of the most.
but he's really the brains of the organization. I mean, he actually has a spreadsheet where he knows the cost of every dish served. If eggs go up from $9 to $9.25, he knows how that impacts. He knows, it's funny. Patty was making a sandwich. If she eats soup, she'll make it into a sandwich, right? And she's making a sandwich, and he said, Thea, the Greek word for aunt, he goes, Thea, could you use the heel of the bread instead of the center of the bread? Because the heel of the bread, they just use it for soaking up the grease from bacon, but the middle of the bread, that's served to customers, right? She goes, can you use the heel of the bread instead? She's like, this is where I am now. I've lost my status.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. But I will tell you, restaurants are a brutal industry to be in. It's competitive and cutthroat, and you really make a profit pennies at a time. But we have been enormously blessed by a very loyal base of customers, a fan base, if you will. There's a lot of regulars. There's a lot of familiar faces. And I will tell you what's kind of neat. Sarasota, when I practiced and delivered babies there and did surgeries there, it was a very small town. It was a small beach town. It's kind of been discovered since COVID, and now it's, much more crowded and much more cosmopolitan. But it was really just a southern Gulf beach town. And so what I really enjoy about going down, because if I want to have a date with Patty on the weekends, I have to pour coffee. I have to work at the restaurant, put on a t-shirt and jeans. But it's uncanny how often I run into patients. And one patient, I recognized her, and she introduced me to this beautiful woman that she was sitting next to, and that 30-year-old beautiful woman was a baby that I delivered 30 years earlier.
Wow.
And she stood up and she gave me a hug, and I felt the baby bump. And I peeled back and I looked down, and she said, any chance I could get you to come out of retirement for just for 2 months, to keep the family tradition alive. So it's really a fascinating, it's a fascinating experience when you get to see the kids that you delivered all grown up.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. That's great. All right. What do you guys think? 9:30?
I'm good. I just want to say thank you,
Yeah.
thank you from the bottom of my heart, Dr. Joe, for doing this. I think Maya and Kyle and Jack are going to have a good outcome. I firmly believe that. And again, I'm so grateful that you've spent this evening with us, and I hope that we'll see you again. And thank you, Chris.
Oh, my pleasure. And Dr. Joe, thank you. Jules, of course, thank you for coming up with this idea with Aaron. And I'm so happy that we are able to provide this platform. And Dr. Joe, you are always and forever invited back on whenever you want to come back on.
Thanks, and I promise I'll actually show up on time next time. I'm so sorry for being tardy today. I really.
That's okay. Jules and I could talk for 2 more hours, but
no,
it's all good. I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did show up. You took your time. You didn't rush. There were no problems with that. So
great. And thank you to your audience for being so kind and so warm and so supportive. Again, I know that my hiatus from the channel has been longer than any of us really would have liked, but 2024 was tough. It was tough, but that which does not kill us makes us stronger. And
yes,
I'm back. I'm coming back.
Oh my! And Frankie agrees.
Thanks, Frankie. Look at Jules.
I know. You see the Italian coming out, right?
No doubt. It's like
every little freaking noise this dog hears, he goes nuts, like he thinks somebody's invading.
Axe murderer.
You're so funny. Guys, this was a ton of fun. I would love to do it again. And thank you for all your kind words. And thanks for letting me talk about the channel and talk about the breakfast company. And
Absolutely.
Listen, the only thing that I want to say is, if you'll allow me, is I just want everybody to keep the Kowalskis in your hearts and in your prayers, right?
Yep.
This ain't over. And even with the appeal, unless you get a per curiam of affirmation where it's just a simple one pager, with the appeals court saying we agree, there will be more drama ahead. So please, 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 the Kowalskis are in a better place today than they were 2 years ago, but they're still, Maya has been heard, but there's still a lot of trying to shout her down. So please keep them in your heart and in your thoughts and in your prayers.
Very good. We will and we shall.
Thank you, Chris.
And on that note, I'm going to bid everyone in the chat good night. I'm going to bid my favorite doctor in the whole wide world good night. And thank you,
Jules.
Chris, for hosting Jules Investigates once again. So good night, everybody.
All right, Jules. Good night.
Thanks so much, guys.
All
good
right,
night.
Dr. Joe. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Chris.
Bye. All right. And with that, I wanted to pull up. So Trial Junkies United, objection. They are talking about food and snacks. Sounds good. So yes. And then Super Ball, the Moo says hello to you. So, all right, guys. Thank you so much, Dr. Joe. Thank you, Jules. Thank you. You always bring such great, wonderful content to our channel, and we are more than happy to provide you with the platform. Please keep bringing it. Dr. Joe, again, you are always and forever welcome to come back and talk. And we are happy that you were with us tonight. And we will definitely be keeping an eye and a track on Maya and the Kowalskis and JHACH going forward. So with that, I will say thank you guys for watching us. Tomorrow, we're going to have Gigi from Pretty Lies and Alibis on. We will be talking about Zachary Hughes and the Rose Petal trial that she was at. So a lot of great things this week. Started with Dr. Joe, and we'll carry over to Gigi tomorrow. So thanks for watching. Have a great night. Take care of yourselves. Love each other. Love yourselves. Be kind to each other. And thanks for watching. We'll see you later. Bye.